Indonesia is partly free. Philippines is only partly free. So debate doesn't really solve the debate. Here, a closer view, you can see the countries which we're going to be talking about today. Thailand also comes out as only partly free. And according to Freedom House, progress in freedom has stalled. And if you look at this map, based on their criteria and their ratings over the years from 1989 to 2012, you see that around the year 2000, it began to flatline. And the number of free or countries they described as free remained about the same, partly free around the same, and not free remained about the same. And the world settles into a steady state of about 45% of countries being described as free, by which they mean freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to vote, and decide your leaders and other specific criteria that you can look up online. And according to Freedom House, the state of freedom reaches its nadir in 1975 when 40 countries, just 45% of the world's independent states, were ranked free. And almost all of them were in Western Europe, a few scattered elsewhere, North America. Now, if you look at it this way on a chart, global findings between free, not free, and partly free, you can see it's kind of it's about a third each almost, or a little bit over. And if you look in terms of population, 40% free, 35% are not free, and 25% partly free. And then if you look at it according to continents, it turns out, according to Freedom House, that the most free place on earth is in Europe. And the least free place on earth is Middle East and North Africa. And that, sort of makes sense. I suppose most of the democracies you would think are in Europe, and most non-democratic states, you would say, are probably in the Middle East and in North Africa. And the rest are, Eurasia doesn't come out too well either, largely because China is such a vast part of Asia, and of course because the ratings for Russia are usually low. We have a Russian expert here who will debate that for us. So the number of countries designated by freedom in the world, this is the Freedom House report, stood at 88. And the number is partly free, 59, and 48 countries were deemed not free. And if you look at another chart, it's just focused on Asia from 2010. I point this out because they include the United States as a Pacific country. This is done, I believe, by, it might be the Heritage Foundation. But they like Taiwan, so they point out Taiwan is among the freest countries in Asia, a fact that often seems overlooked, even when states in the region convene to talk about democracy. And Taiwan comes in at a rank of 10 in Asia and 49th in the world. And down at the bottom of the places we're looking at, you have, where is Myanmar? Myanmar ranks 199 in the world, way down bottom of the list. And according to Freedom House, political freedom in Asia is again mixed, but gaining a little bit of ground. And they base that on, there used to be 12, but now it seems steadily to be about 9 that are not free. There are 15 about steadily who are partly free, and steadily about 18 who are not free. And even more serious perhaps is that there's been a lag. We did a report, seminar on this not too long ago, that Asian press freedom lags behind other freedoms. And here you see, for example, that Taiwan ranks 47th in the world and 9th in Asia. And India, the Philippines, Indonesia rank at lower levels, Thailand even lower, and Burma very low. So all of the reports you'll see of the 6 countries we're discussing tend to be fairly consistent, at least in the order of in which they rank them. And Freedom House rather gloomily reports that it's been an 8th year of global decline in political rights and civil liberties, overall decline. And one of the things they point out is that the year 2013 was notable for a growing list of countries beset by civil wars, terrorist campaigns, and particularly Central African Republic, South Sudan, Afghanistan, Somalia, Iraq, Yemen, and Syria. The losses in 2013, particularly notable for them, were Egypt, where there was hope that there would be a democracy, but the military took over again. They point to increasing restrictions in Russia, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Turkey, Venezuela, and Indonesia. They talked about some leaders are relying on a new form of modern authoritarianism in which they really weaken, cripple the political opposition, but it still exists. But meanwhile, they dominate not only the executive and legislative branches, but also the media, judiciary, civil society, economy, and security. Some of the bright spots, and I don't agree with all this. One, clearly I think is true, is Tunisia. It's probably the only bright spot out of all of the Arab Spring, when all the countries threw off dictatorships. Tunisia is the only one that seems to have made progress in terms of freedom as well as democracy. Now they give it a lot of credit to Pakistan because of the peaceful transition of power to Nawaz Sharif. But if you look at what happened in the news yesterday, where 134 now, young people, students, were killed by terrorists, and another 100, beyond 100, 130 or so people, young children, were wounded, and their teachers. You've got to wonder about, can you really have liberty or democracy in a country where there's so much violence and terrorism? Africa, they find that there are some gains in places, including in Zimbabwe, which I kind of find strange. But anyway, the overall number of electoral democracies rose to 122. In Asia, and I think this is consistent with all the news reports and analyses I see in the journals, is China became increasingly intolerant of dissent in 2013, increasing criminalization of online speech, and the arrest of activists and those who advocated anti-corruption reforms. Indonesia's status declined from free to partly free due to no law restricting activities on non-government organizations. And South Korea, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Malaysia, and Sri Lanka all got downgraded. Again, all of these can be disputed in particular, but the overall trend, I think, is fairly clear. The rankings over the years remain fairly consistent, and when they say go up or down, it's often just by a few points. Now, I want to say about the U.S., because sometimes because I'm from the United States, people think that I think everything in the U.S. is hunky-dory. I tried to indicate that the development of freedom was slow, and certainly government participation in elections was very slow coming. And the Freedom House reports a lot of problems in 2013 in the United States, including the inability of the government to function because of gridlock, splits between the legislature and the president, the executive branch. The continuing existence of Guantanamo Bay, which President Obama pledged to get rid of, which many civil liberties lawyers in America find an abomination. But in 2013, only a handful of people were released. And at year's end, there were over 150 detainees still at the facility. And there is still strong support, particularly now that we have an overwhelming Republican Congress, to maintain maintain Guantanamo and keep people there. The Obama administration also came under great criticism around the world for violations in data collection by the National Security Agency. People who have access to the internet, to your email, to your cell phones, to your websites. The only thing I would point out to the United States as an excuse is the U.S., believe me, is not the only country who does this. All countries who have the capability throughout the world are all listening to your cell phone calls, which can be picked up out of the air. They're tapping into your phones if they can. They're reading your email, and I have 2 minutes to go. And finally, there was a great controversy because the Obama administration, surprisingly more than any previous administration, went after the telephone records of journalists who were reporting these investigations into the National Security Agency. The Economist, in a famous recent essay, has talked about the crisis of confidence in democracies. Freedom House itself judges that the movement toward more democratic governance peaked around 2000, and since 2005 has been in decline, brought in part by a lack of confidence in democracy. Two principal reasons often given. One was the failure of the capitalist system in democracies, the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008. And second of all, the rise of China, which is clearly not a democracy, giving rise to what one author, Stephen Halper, has called the Beijing Consensus, subtitled Legitimizing Authoritarianism in Our Time. That is, that it's possible to achieve prosperity without political freedom, which for many countries, developing countries in the world, provided a new model of how to be successful. You can be authoritarian, and because authoritarian states are almost always more efficient, you at times can have more effective policies, even if people have no freedom. Now, other disappointments, and this is from the literature, failures in democratic experiments, usually Russia, the Iraq War, and Egypt are the primary examples.